Welcome to BizMeds with Darris and Saad, where we give you the medications for your business. This podcast is all about the minimum effective doses you need to make a massive improvement in your business. Listen and enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We are your hosts. My name is Saad.
I'm Darris.
So we've been talking about we've been sharing the word framework back and forth a few times in the last few episodes. And, it got us talking, and I wanted to bring up something that you have previously worked on, Darris, and it's the framework of the Afterburner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I find it very interesting. I use that pretty much every day of my life. So first question, what is the Afterburner framework?
Okay, so how would this, before we jump into that,
Yeah.
right? I think it's super important. Maybe I say that a lot. I don't know. I think everything's important, apparently.
Yeah. It is.
Hopefully everything we cover in this podcast is really important.
Exactly.
And that's the whole point of this
all
podcast. We're cutting through the BS. We're giving you the exact minimum effective dose of the most important things. The reason we talk about frameworks, I think, is, I think we find that if you follow a framework, it's much easier to take really complex ideas and boil them down into more of like a formula and something that's easy to follow. Because I think if you follow a framework, it's much easier, and it's much easier to understand and communicate that and to visualize. And I think that's why a lot of the stuff we do is around talking about frameworks and then, explaining the framework or the idea and then how it's relevant. So
methodologies that other people have done and
exactly
worked successfully.
Right? So repeat that and you should get the same result.
Exactly.
And
you just replace X with yourself, right, in the formula?
Sure, solve for X.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to then answering your question. So the Afterburner framework.
Yeah.
And I guess what specifically, where should we start with that?
Well,
it's wide open.
Help us understand what Afterburner is,
right,
and how does one comprehend this
Okay.
framework, right?
So when we talk about, when you say Afterburner,
Yeah.
what immediately comes to mind?
Jets,
Right. Okay.
spaceships,
Yeah.
rockets,
Yeah, things that go fast.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. So the Afterburner, maybe everyone's watched Top Gun.
Yeah.
And, you see this F-16 or this fighter jet, and at the very end of it, see this big flame coming out. And really, it's about creating speed or velocity, right?
Right.
And especially in business, that's really important. Now, the framework of Afterburner really works on the first three letters of the word AFT, right? So what's happened with that, or where this came about, was really thinking through how do you create more and more velocity and how do you increase speed? And that's how that came. And one of the things I've wrestled with, even in my career as a coach, as a consultant, a business owner, and even working in different organizations is, I keep hearing this idea that, time is our most valuable and precious resource. I don't actually think it is.
No?
No.
This is a new one, guys. Explain.
Okay. So do I think it's a valuable resource?
Okay.
Absolutely. Time. You can't create more time in the sense that, we can't time travel. We don't know how to. And even though there's a lot of science that goes around about time. So that whole thing is it's not like going in, go to the kitchen, you put some ingredients and you can create something, right? You can't just create time or nothing. It's, for all we know, it's time is very linear, in a linear fashion. So we experience time in linear fashion. So we can't go create it. So in that sense, it's a finite resource, right? We're born, we live, we accomplish things, and then we're no longer here, right? So if anyone's surprised about that, we shouldn't be. So in that sense, yes, it's a valuable resource because we have a finite amount of it. Do I think it's the most? I don't think it's the most, and I think it's actually part of a triad. So it's actually part of three. And I think what happens is the three most valuable resources we have are attention, focus, and time is really a function of those. So we talk about Afterburner. It's attention. So what is it that we're paying attention to? So what is the goal, right? So if you think about an airplane or whatever it is, right, you have a target and you lock onto that target, or if you're launching a rocket to space, you have a target. So that's where the attention goes to. Now, where you put your attention will determine where you go. I think that's pretty easy concept, right? The other part of that triad is focus. So if you think about, I think a really good way to visualize that, if we go back to that, the F-16 fighter jet,
right?
And you see it taking off, and what do you see at the rear of the jet? You see that jet, that burner, and it opens and closes, right? So what it's doing is it's focusing energy. So the tighter you put that focus, right, the tighter it puts that focus into it, the more energy it focuses into that and creates movement. So that's why I think focus is that other part of that that formula, right? So then what happens is you have attention, so where the goal is, and then you're going to focus we put your focus on it. So you're going to focus your energy on that. And as a result, you're going to move towards that. And that's where time comes in. So you either increase the speed and get there quicker, or if you disperse your focus, right, then you have less energy moving towards it. It's going to take you longer to get there.
Okay.
And if you don't have your attention on the right thing, well, you'll miss it altogether. Right. So that's the genesis. That was the catalyst of the Afterburner framework. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If I haven't blown your mind yet, hopefully this will. So the Afterburner framework is actually, the way we spell it is incorrect. And I'm going to add another F in there. So it's AFFT, Afterburner.
Okay.
And the secret formula to this, and I don't think many people talk about this, and it's really a little known area of neuroscience. And some people may have heard of this. It's flow, and we use flow state. And for those of the nerds out there who really want to get into the details, go look up a jet engine with an afterburner. Okay, so a normal jet engine, most jet engines don't have an afterburner on it, right? So the afterburner is actually another kind of burner after the jet, and what it does, it takes the unburnt fuel, adds additional fuel and oxygen, and ignites it to create more. And that creates even more energy to create more velocity.
Okay.
And so if everyone's like, what the heck is a flow state, right? Those are the moments where, and maybe you've had this happen, where you're doing you're doing something, right? Maybe it's a sport, maybe it's work or something, but you're so focused in the now. You're just dialed right in. And we call them, people are like, you call it like being in the zone. You're just so time either just disappears. You just disconnect from your experience of time, whether it either speeds up or slows down. You have this like either time dilation or time crunch, and you're just so in the zone that you just feel like you can't make any bad decisions. Like you are in it, right? So maybe you're skiing and you just, wow, you are just carving. You can't do it. You're rock climbing and you can just scale. You just see, right? Or you're so involved in a project, your creativity, and you just know, and you're creating all these wonderful things. Those are flow states. And most of us have probably experienced those. You can think back. Have you ever had that similar experience?
Yeah, a few times. Yeah, now that you put that in that formula and the way that you're describing it, yeah, I've had the flow state a few times.
So we can actually help people achieve that flow state regularly. It's a really simple cycle. It's a 4-stage cycle, and we can help people do that. And that is really the magic sauce in the Afterburner framework. So what we want to do is we want to align our attention, focus, and as a function, we achieve our goal faster. So we hit that time element. And then what we do is we add in a flow state and we dramatically compress timeframes to achieve that. Right? And we always making sure that we're, again, using our focus and attention to do that. And that is where the Afterburner framework comes from. And it's really, for a lot of business owners, it's a game changer because most of them don't really know that exists.
So, question for you. How does one implement the Afterburner framework?
Okay. So that really comes down to understanding, getting really great clarity on what it is that you are trying to achieve, right? That really comes to when you are trying to get into flow state, that becomes really important. So there's one of the precursors to getting to flow state is really clear goals. Right. So knowing what it is that you're focused on getting, right? So where are you putting your attention? What is it that you're actually after? That's kind of the first thing, right? Sometimes, it actually helps to take a step back and get some clarity on what those larger goals that you're trying to achieve. And then, probably the one that most people have the hardest part with is focus. We live in an age where our there's a war for our attention. Right. If you think about, how many times you pick up your cell phone to check your email or check when your social media, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Facebook, whatever it is, right? Depending on your age category. Maybe it's TikTok.
MySpace.
Really, yeah. MySpace. Yes. That's exactly the one. But there is a war on our attention, and what it really affects is our dopamine receptors. So, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, there's a whole army of science around how do we capture people's attention. It's why we keep picking up our cell phone. So a lot of the times we don't even really realize how distracted we are until you ask someone to put away their phone in another room for an hour and a half, right? Turn it off and you will start to get the twitch.
Yeah.
That is your dopamine system wanting that because we're so conditioned to want it. So part of it is reconditioning our ability to focus. So a lot of that really is about how do we cut off a lot of those distractions? How do we get into a place where we can actually have the stillness and ability to focus on a task? And again, that kind of layers into what is it that you're getting really clear on what we need to do. And that helps kind of drive more focus. And then funny enough, we can leverage the dopamine system to reinforce that. Because once we get really clear goals, and we get really focused, we can actually trigger the dopamine system to work for us with a couple others. Like that's, but that's how we can use our dopamine system for us. And then with that, by doing that regularly, right, layering some of those very clear times. So I think the easiest way to do is, there's a couple ways. So we talk about minimum effective dose. You could do a flow day, right? We could actually build out a day where you achieve more in that day than you've ever done in an entire month, and most people have done an entire month. You could do that. You could layer in just flow blocks. You could do, a 90-minute block where you are just dialed into achieving one thing and being really focused and not distracted and that. And as a result, you can probably get into a flow state and move towards those goals, those long-term goals. Right. That's how you can start to leverage the Afterburner.
So if you recall our first episode, we were talking about the cognitive load.
Yes.
Would you say that the cognitive load can have you're able to manage a little better with the Afterburner frame effect? Or would you say the Afterburner frame effect needs to be implemented to get out of the cognitive?
You're asking me chicken or egg. We're getting down to the science of chicken or egg. And really, so here's going to be another intro to another idea, which is the Michelangelo effect.
Right.
Okay. I know. We're just going to throw them all out there. Yeah. And the idea is this is where I kind of open the kimono a little bit, and this probably won't surprise many people, but a lot of especially coaches, right? they do is they layer things on.
Right.
Oh, they get a new client. Oh, you now have to do this. You now have to do this. And you have to do this. And really, in my experience, most business owners are, no, I want to work with you because I can't do all these things. I'm actually already overwhelmed. My cognitive load's already off the charts, and I need to find a way to do less. So I say that to go back to the Michelangelo effect. And when you look at, if anyone has ever seen Michelangelo's David, I've had the absolute pleasure of seeing it in person, and it is amazing. If you don't know that statue was actually carved out of one solid piece of marble. And it was actually a piece of marble that no other artist would touch because it had the way the veins were running through it that no other artist was skilled enough to touch it because it looked like an ugly piece of marble. And it was Michelangelo. And what he did was he looked at it, and what he didn't do to create David was he didn't start adding things to it. He actually started taking things away. So and this is maybe a long way to answer the question, is that when you look at implementing the afterburner effect, the first thing I think is really important to do, and I think where you get the best bang for your buck, is deal with your cognitive load first. Okay. Right? So getting things off your plate, that, setting rules, leveraging decisions and things that will allow you to recover mental and emotional horsepower, that RAM in the computer, to start allowing you to work and think more effectively. And then once you do that, once you have that little bit of energy back, then it's actually a little bit easier to sit back and say, okay, what is it that I'm actually trying to achieve? What am I going for? Once you do that, then you can layer in the afterburner effect and say, okay, well, how do I now leverage my attention, focus, time, and a flow state all together, right, to really condense time frames to get where I want to go. And, it's kind of the nexus. It's kind of the meeting point of a few different frameworks. That's how I see it in most places. Again, does it work always like that? Maybe not. Again, it's really going to be, some of it's going to be situational dependent. Sometimes it's, okay, we need to really we have to carve out time and just put a little halt on things. And can you, at maybe a bigger scale, sacrifice one day to achieve actually a lot more time and energy back for the rest of your month to deal with all that other stuff. So it's not clear. What I tend to see, though, is deal with some of that cognitive load up front. First, okay. And then you can start to implement the Afterburner framework.
Okay. That's a really good way to put it. So just so I understand it a bit better, the Afterburner framework is an abbreviation. The A is attention.
Absolutely.
The F is focus. And then the T is time.
Yes.
But you have added another F in there for flow.
Absolutely. So it's AFFT. So that's the Afterburner framework. Yeah. So if you ever look and it's not even spelled correctly. Yeah. Well, there's a reason. Attention, focus, flow, and time, right? And time becomes the squishy part. It either takes longer to achieve something, or we condense time frames.
Right.
Depending on how we use our attention, focus, and flow. And I think those four are our most valuable assets. And there's a war on our attention and our ability. And as a result, we've lost the ability to even focus on things for a moment, right? For those of you who have kids, it's like, how many times you go somewhere, or we catch ourselves. I caught myself, spending time is like, oh, I got to take out my phone and see what's going on, versus being present in the moment and enjoying that time there and focusing that energy there.
For the flow cycle, I think maybe we can talk about that in another episode, because I think it's a pot of gold of its own. And, we have both got experiences of how, after implementing that, the results that we've seen. So maybe we can talk about that in another episode, mostly because it's a big thing to unwrap. So
the cycle itself is pretty simple, right? And the idea of flow is, again, a really lesser known area of neuroscience. There's a whole branch of neuroscience around it. And we'll definitely cover it more in depth. And I just think it's important for people to understand that like this is a whole area that is a game changer for most. I can't remember how many times I've talked to people, and you as well, right? We're talking to other business owners, other entrepreneurs, and high performers, and we talk about that experience of being so in the zone, and without fail, everyone I've ever worked with or talked about this, they can recall moments, and the funny part of all, maybe it's not funny, I don't know. I say that just the interesting part of that is most people just stumble on it by accident. And what they don't realize is there is a formula, there is a guaranteed way to get into flow state and dramatically improve creativity, productivity, like everything.
Right. So where I was going with that was, you mentioned that, typically what you do is the right way to do flow is a longer day block. So for people that have kids, I know you mentioned you can do a flow block or have a little dedicated time that allows you to get into that state. How would you say that applies to the broad audiences?
I think working with many different clients, from special forces, former special forces, to I would say, executives from all over the world, around the globe, and even some Hollywood actors.
What?
Yes. And again, everyday people.
Yeah.
When we talk about that, it's really it's situational dependent.
Right.
There is what works for them. It goes back to rational versus reasonable. For some people, what they're going to find is with all of the things that they're dealing with, right? So from some business owners that have a team, they have a group of people that are responsible, like every day they're putting out fires.
Yeah.
And so for them, a flow day is actually way more beneficial. So they can align to the highest priority items, right? And call them the big dominoes.
Yeah.
The things that when they get those done, they actually knock down thing after thing and make it easier and collapse timeframes. For some, it's going to be, it's going to be more beneficial to just carve out some time. And it really is dependent on the situation and where they are. Because what we're doing is we're actually just leveraging the same framework. It's how we implement it becomes the nuance. Right. And so it's not just here, do this. I mean, we're doing that. It's just at the scale and how we do it.
Okay, that's really good to know. It's just that from our experiences, we've noticed that not everybody has the same type of time availability. So having that flexibility on that formula and applying it to that specific situation, that's really good to know.
Yeah, that is the Afterburner framework, and I threw a couple in there for extra measure, just because we're all about value, and we want to give you as much as we possibly can.
Awesome.
And I'm sure this is going to generate, any one of these topics we could continue to go in. And, again, this podcast is about, let's just be really clear, concise, and dial in to where we can provide really most value and not dive in or go into the minutia of, the world that, rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And here we are, spend 3 hours talking about stuff that we could have covered now in 20 minutes.
Exactly. Right. So I think that's all for this episode. And, we'll get into the details or the minutia, like you said, of the flow cycle as we kind of go through this podcast, and maybe in the next episode, depending on your feedback and what it is that you guys maybe want to hear next.
So maybe they have no feedback on this next episode, and we're just going to decide until we get going. As always, thanks, Mom, for watching.
Thanks, parents. Thanks to my sister. Thanks. Maybe I'll have a list of shout-outs next time. But thank you.
If you would like to sponsor this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll give you a shout-out.
Yeah. Thank you for, all of that you shared with us today, and making this super valuable, at least for me, having done this firsthand with you several times. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for everything. And thank you for watching, and we look forward to spending some more time with you in the next episode.
Yeah.
Until then, I'm Darris.
My name's Saad.
And we'll see you next time.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Mm-hmm.